We all have heard of treasures hidden inside sunken ships, and while this may capture our imagination, some of the most valuable and cherished items lie within our family heirlooms. Gail, an older woman with a heartwarming story, went to the Antiques Roadshow in New York City to uncover the value of her great-grandparents' collection of baseball cards. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video with your friends. She had already been offered a humble figure for the cards. Still, the revelation of the appraisal revealed the actual value of the baseball cards and left her and everyone else completely speechless. Nestled in a suburb near Boston, Gail grew up with an uncompromising love for baseball, especially the revered Boston Red Sox. But she wasn't alone in her enthusiasm for the sport. Her entire family loved baseball, and it all could be traced back to her great-great-grandparents and the dawn of baseball in the 1870s. Loving the sport was in her blood, but she never would have imagined just how valuable her family's participation in the sport indeed was until decades later. It all started when Gail was spring cleaning her family home. She found a collection of baseball cards that looked rather old. It was just sitting in a desk drawer, and I ran across it one day and decided I'd like to have it, Gail shared with Antiques Roadshow. Gail asked around, and no one in her family had any idea about the baseball cards, and no one wanted them. So Gail chose to keep the cards with her. She didn't think they were valuable but felt an emotional connection to them. But after keeping them in her desk drawer for a few months, Gail decided to research the cards. She found out they were from the late 1800s and belonged to her great-grandfather. This wasn't a massive surprise to the elderly woman, as it was a well-known fact that her great-grandfather collected sports memorabilia, especially baseball cards, though Gail could never have imagined the priceless value of what she had found. Time passed, and Gail casually told many of her friends and family her story about finding baseball cards from the 1800s in a desk drawer. Everyone thought it was a fun tale and recommended that Gail consider getting the cards appraised. To Gail, the baseball cards were a part of her family history, which was valuable enough for her. But when a friend offered Gail a few $100s for the baseball cards, she wondered how helpful they were. Gail refused the offer to sell the cards and made it clear to everyone that she didn't plan on giving away the baseball cards for any amount of money. And the next comings, the elderly woman spent researching the cards. She found other treasures lost in her family home and took them to several appraisers, but all responded differently. Some made her believe they were worth nothing, while others told her they could be sold for thousands. The elderly sports aficionado wasn't satisfied with any response, and when in 2014, the Antiques Roadshow made its way to the Big Apple. Gail realized that was the right opportunity to get actual value for her set of baseball cards. While the initial appraisal offer she had received years before wasn't confirmed, Gail and her family anticipated getting an appraisal value of a few grand for the whole collection. But after making her way to New York City, she never would have expected to be left speechless and in tears about what the expert appraisers had to say about it. Gail explained to the Antiques Roadshow that when she decided to keep the cards when she found them, she didn't realize at all what it was worth. That was when I was much younger. But as time passed, she realized they were probably worth a pretty penny. Though regardless of this revelation, Gail was in no mood to sell. She felt this part of her history was intertwined with the baseball cards, and her expectations for the Antiques Roadshow were to get advice on how much to insure the cards for. Since the 70s, the Antiques Roadshow has been an internationally televised show to bring people with potentially valuable items and provides special appraising services from certified experts and professionals. PBS describes the series as part adventure, part history lesson, part treasure hunt, which is the show's most accurate description. And what makes the performance even more remarkable is that events are set up in multiple cities and countries. The entire purpose of the show is for people to share their valuables with expert appraisers. Everyone can bring anything to the front, from obscure spoon collections to giant trophies. The Antiques Roadshow helps people get their items categorized, and then you're paired up with an appraiser with advanced knowledge on authenticating and knowing all of the crucial information needed. That way, they can give your item a genuine, authentic, and accurate value. For Gail's consultation, she was paired up with the enthusiastic Layla Dunbar, a certified appraiser with expertise in sports memorabilia. Upon her arrival at the Antiques Roadshow, Gail and her friend Edie were extremely excited to learn more about her collection of America's favorite sports. And while she wasn't entirely sure just how much this piece of history was worth, coming from a family of sports lovers, Gail was pretty excited to meet with Layla Dunbar, who had extensive knowledge about baseball and could shed some factual light into her family's connection with the sport. And while most appraisals are short and sweet with Gail, it became a long and intriguing conversation. The older woman was able to tell her all about the incredible background story of her sports memorabilia, which included much more than a batch of cards. Back in 1871, my great-great-grandmother had a boarding house in Boston and housed the Boston baseball team. Most of them had come from Cincinnati Red Stockings, and most were among the first to be paid to play baseball, Gail shared with Lila. And as Gail was telling the story, Lila was quietly examining the cards, and you should speak from her facial expression that these baseball cards were quite a find. The older woman explained how she had uncovered the cards in a desk drawer, which her family had left forgotten. But Lila had to cut Gail off, and she excitedly explained that these are amongst the oldest baseball cards in existence. It is a true wow moment. Yes, Gail had stumbled upon the most valuable baseball cards in existence. But what blew Lila away was all the extra details that came with this set of cards, including the priceless backstory. Gail might have found these cards in a drawer, but where did they come from? It turns out that because Gail's great-great-grandmother had hosted many of the players for one of the original baseball teams, her son, Gail's great-grandfather, got to live with them too. He was a little boy in this house that lived with his heroes, these great ball players, and they even gave him a pass to the games where he bought these cards. Layla Dunbar explained on Antiques Roadshow. Some of these so-called great ball players that Layla was referring to were the athletes that founded the whole sport before the National League was even created. What you have here are some of the earliest known 1871 photographic baseball cards, Lila explained. Glancing over the collected cards, Lila noticed that some players included were Harry and George Wright, the original Wright brothers, and Albert Spalding. Now, Spalding is a very familiar name. He was the first well-known player to use a fielding glove. And what did he build from that? A sporting goods empire, Layla further explained with excitement. But these fantastic founding athletes didn't just stay in her great-great-grandmother's boarding house. They cared deeply for her too. And Gail had a priceless item to prove it, one which would add a rich depthness to her collection. It was clear that the cards themselves held great value. That's what led Gail to the roadshow in the first place, after all. But the condition of the cards plays a significant role too. Apparently, my great-grandfather collected them, and he, unfortunately, cut them down to fit this little album, so they're all slightly askew, Gail explained to Lila. But this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. This was a personal and sentimental piece of the collection, which further authenticated the story. The special thing, besides the cards, is this letter. And they all wrote a little sentence and signed it, Gail further explained. The most memorable part of Gail's collection was the entire team's letter to Gail's great-great-grandmother. As mentioned, the team was looked after by her during their stay at her boarding house. And during one of their trips, the team decided to thank the wonderful host by writing her a handwritten, heartfelt letter that was personally addressed to Gail's great-great-grandmother. In 1871, visiting the Washington Olympics, they got rained out, and they wrote her a letter at their boarding house, telling her how much they missed her. Layla further clarified. We have never seen these cards before, and to have this letter with Harry Wright and Spalding on it is tremendous. To have anything with their signatures on it is phenomenal, because again, you're talking about the precursor to the National and American Leagues. Layla reaffirmed that they must have loved her. I'm sure she did the cooking, the cleaning for them.